Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today is this month's patron pick, which means that this topic was suggested and voted for by my supporters on Patreon. Thank you so much to all of you. Amy controls a grizzly bears and a silent arbiter, and she attacks with just the silent arbiter. Nick controls a season of the witch. Does Amy's grizzly bears die at end of turn because it did not attack? Alright, so this is a really famous rules question, and I've been asked to field it several times since I started this channel. And I've got to kind of admit, when I first saw it on the patron pick voting, I was sort of secretly hoping that it would lose. The reason is because I wasn't really confident that I would be able to make a good video on this topic, for a reason that will become apparent very shortly. On the other hand, the last time I was thinking that, the resulting video ended up being one of the most popular ones on my channel, so here's hoping that I can at least do this topic some justice. Now, there's two obvious schools of thought on what should happen in this case. One of them is that the grizzly bears should die because Amy didn't attack with it. The other is that the grizzly bears couldn't have attacked because the silent arbiter was attacking, and so therefore it should live. So which one of these interpretations is the correct one? And, well, here's where things are going to get a little bit embarrassing, because it turns out that there actually isn't any official support for either of those interpretations. There isn't anywhere in the comprehensive rules where it rigorously defines what it means for a creature to have been able to attack, nor am I aware of any official rulings delivered through any other official channels that would indicate one way or the other. So that's the answer to this question. It's undefined. Now, that might come as a little bit of a shock to you, especially when you consider the English meaning of the word comprehensive, as in comprehensive rules. However, this situation isn't even unique. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while, you might remember several months ago where I did a video talking about how the official way to resolve an Urza's Bauble activation would be. In that video, I noted that there was no comprehensive rules support for the correct ruling that I gave as to whether the targeted player would get to know which card had been looked at out of their hand. At least in the Urza's Bauble case, though, there actually is an official ruling that was delivered through official channels. The Season of the Witch has no such thing. A colleague of mine who's really interested in this sort of stuff has even cataloged several other types of situations where the comprehensive rules don't really seem to give a definitive answer, at least not without some amount of hand waving. So, how did we get into this situation, and what can we do about it? In order to answer those kinds of questions, I'd like to start out with a little bit of background as Magic as a game. So, it was originally invented as just some fun game that D&D players could play during their downtime. And that's sort of the kind of background that a lot of Magic rules developed with. If your playgroup played one way and a different playgroup played a different way, well hey, that was okay. The D&D rules had been basically like that for a long time, and the Magic rules kind of evolved with that same sort of mentality. There was even a line in the original Magic rulebooks that suggested flipping a coin and deciding about what the correct answer should be later if you and your opponent came to some situation where you couldn't agree on what the correct ruling should be in one of your games. Now, Magic has kind of evolved past that point, but those sorts of ideas really help explain how a lot of cards, especially ones from Magic's earliest days, have a kind of not as much rigor as what you would expect out of a modern card. And add that into the fact that these cards were printed almost a decade apart, with the most recent one being printed 20 years ago almost. Gosh, I feel old. And you can kind of see some way about how this sort of situation can come up. But once we've identified that there's an issue like this, surely Wizards would want to fix it, right? Well, that does make sense. However, there are a couple of reasons why Wizards might not make it a top priority to fix situations like this. In the first place, the rules of Magic are a complex and intricate tapestry. Pulling on any one thread could lead to some unintentional consequences in some other areas. And it might even be discovered that the fix that you propose and put into action isn't actually sufficient to solve the issue that's at hand, or some related issue that might crop up as a result of it. And so Wizards is generally very careful about making changes to the comprehensive rules unless there's some really good reason for it. They certainly can and have shown that they are willing to do this sort of thing if something becomes a big enough issue, but if it doesn't, well, the idea of maybe letting people go with the alpha situation where you just go based off of what everybody thinks the answer should be, well, that can get a little bit appealing. Another kind of maybe more cynical idea might be the fact that if you have identified a problem, then doing the research and the discussions necessary to put a solution in place is a lot of time. and that is time that you could be spending doing something else if you're Magic's rules manager. I want you to picture yourself in that person's shoes for just a minute, and I wonder if you would be bold enough to open up your doors to complaints and personally address every sort of issue that someone came up with as a problem in Magic the Gathering's rules. I know I certainly wouldn't. Finally, there's another consideration that's on a more philosophical level. It might not even be possible to come up with a complete and consistent version of the comprehensive rules. This has certainly been proven to be the case in arenas such as formal mathematical logic, and we know that the rules that that area plays by are a lot more rigid and predictable than the ones that the Magic the Gathering R&D team does. Even if we were able to come up with a good solution for the comprehensive rules, there's absolutely no guarantee at all that it would survive the next mechanic from the minds that brought us Morph, Mutate, and Stickers. And so these are some of the reasons why Wizards of the Coast might not be super hot to act on these sorts of issues when they do come up. There certainly are some practical considerations to keep in mind, even if from an aesthetic point of view, it certainly isn't ideal. I want to point out here that this is all conjecture from me. I don't have any sort of information that would give me any insider knowledge about what's going on at Wizards. And for the most part, most judges do not, unless they happen to work at Wizards, which I also do not. And so everything that I just said is basically speculation. There isn't any actual truth there, but if anyone does know, I would definitely be interested to hear about it. So with all of that said, there's one more very important practical question that we need to answer. That being, what would we do if this were to come up in an actual game of Magic? And if this was a kitchen table game of Magic, which, let's face it, it probably would be, then the answer, in my opinion at least, is pretty clear. We should go back to the time-honored technique of arguing about it with your friends until they all admit that you're right. So in that vein, I'd like everybody who has an opinion on this matter to post what your opinion and your justification for it is, whether that be flavor-driven or gameplay-driven, in the comments below. And I definitely look forward to seeing some really awesome ideas. Now, of course, what would happen if this were to come up in a more serious Magic tournament? And the answer in that case is, if we're dealing with a serious Magic tournament, then we're going to have a head judge. And the head judge's rulings are final. Ordinarily, we would want the head judge to make those rulings based on some sort of official source, like the Magic Comprehensive Rules, or officially published documents or rulings of some sort. However, in the absence of any relevant ones of those, then the head judge does have the authority to interpret the cards and the game rules according to their own readings. And so that's the answer to that question. So, Judge Dave, what would you do if this situation came up at a tournament where you were the head judge? And hey, I guess if you've made it this far, then I at least owe you the answer to that question. In my opinion, I think that when you were declaring attackers, you could have chosen to attack with the Grizzly Bears, but you didn't. So therefore, the Grizzly Bears should die. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you again so much to all of my patrons and to everybody else who supports this channel in any way, whether that be by suggesting questions, or by sharing with your friends, or by liking, commenting, and subscribing to my videos. Thank you all so much. Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.